Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's great to be with you. Today is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. We get together most weekday mornings to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories, and support each of you. So today's discussion, I guess in some regards, is part two from yesterday. So yesterday we went through this full Excel spreadsheet on moneyrepair.org as a topic. And I don't want to waste your time and revisit that, but it was a really, I think, productive conversation. If there's anything from yesterday that you'd like to follow up on, feel free to type that into the Q&A and we can go through it. But more importantly, what I wanted to address today is the economic model. Because I think what's really important is that we're all clear on, of course, what we do and how we get paid. And this economic model is a very simple illustration of that. So we can play with some what if scenarios. But most importantly, I'd like to walk away with today's training, so you have a plan for the month of June. So before we get into that, though, we like to kind of open. If you go to a sporting event, they'll usually start with the national anthem. In our world, we want to start with this very basic premise that's crucial that we're all on the same page of. And it states the number one rule for getting money to start or grow a business is you must have a fundable business to get business funding. It's just a requirement. So a lot of people, they want money, they need money, they desire money, but the problem is a lot of people, they don't qualify for money. They don't qualify for business funding. And that's really what you and I do. And it's a two-phase process, right? Phase one is we create a fundable business, typically through a Shelf Corp. And then secondly, we take them into funding. So with the grant modification that we had as of June 1st, clients no longer have to pay for a Shelf Corp and then wait to get reimbursed. The grant literally covers the cost of that Shelf Corp in advance, so they don't have to pay for it. They will pay a one-time processing fee. That processing fee you can alter to build in the income that you want to make, and that is in fact depicted over here. So let's reset this back to some of the normal numbers. So I'll review it briefly, and then we'll take your questions and make any changes, run any scenarios you want. So we believe that the role of being a grant coordinator, which also means reseller, one and the same, it's a great opportunity to help them build financial literacy, help them increase access to capital, no cost to you, no contract assigned, no risk to you. So with that, as we talked about yesterday, if we're going to be an entrepreneur, if we're going to play the game of being an entrepreneur, we have to solve someone's problem. I talk to many people that say they want to be a small business owner, but they're not even able to articulate what is the problem that their business is going to solve. Because if we don't solve someone else's a problem with a good or a service, no one's going to send us any money. And if they don't send us any money, we're going to go broke. That's not a business. So in your and my world, what we do is we help increase access to capital to start or grow a business. The way that we do that is by providing them an express shelf corporation that is fully grant paid. And then once they have that in about 7 days, then we can go to funding. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Your role as a grant coordinator reseller means the same thing, is to go create awareness, is to educate and then enroll them. And so you should have an editable client agreement that you take our information off, put yours on, and get them signed up very easily. So again, any mechanics, any process, any questions you have, we're going to address today. Again, there's zero investment to you. Every once in a while, I have someone that comes and says, well, how much does it cost to be a reseller or a grant coordinator? It's zero. We don't charge for that. So there's no cost now, no cost later. So, as far as the green box here, these are the results. We really don't need, forgive me for saying this, we don't really need to worry about the results. We need to focus on the effort, right? Because it's these variables that drive these results. This is the outcome, right? So, if you and I were going to take a trip, we're going to drive to Miami in your new Ferrari you just bought because all the money you're making this weekend, we need to focus on the drive, right? We'll get to Miami. This is Miami over here. We'll have a great time, but we've got to focus on the drive. We've got to get there. So these are the key variables that I think you need to be aware of and that we need to act upon. So, first of which, we need to have goals, right? So goals fall under what's commonly referred to as SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. You heard of that before. So we need a goal. What is the number of clients that we're going to enroll this month? Now, as of this recording, it's June 11th. So let's say we probably won't hit 20 if we're going to assume we're going to do one a weekday. So let's modify our June plan to be 10 people. We're going to enroll 10 people in the Express Shelf Corp. Grant pays for the entire price of the Shelf Corp. There is a processing fee. You determine what that is. You determine how much you make. So that's our second assumption. We're going to pretend or assume or project on this screen that you're under this scenario, I should say, that you're going to mark it up $500. So you're making 500 upfront per deal. Now, you could change that to zero. That doesn't keep you from making money, but of course it reduces it because it's one of the streams of income. So we're going to leave 500. That seems to be the norm with most of you. On the back end income, we know what you'll make. It's 5% of the capital raise, but we do need to project what we think each client on average will raise. Well, what do you know? We guarantee them, if they go into phase two, we guarantee them a minimum of 100,000. So that's the low end. That's not the high end. It's not up to 100,000. We guarantee 100,000. So we're going to leave that just to be conservative. So I think this is a set of assumptions that any of you should hit between now and the end of the month. So if we do these things, then this is the outcome. Then, even though we only have about half the month left, we would expect your June income to be right about 55,000. And again, I know I almost have to apologize for some of you to say, hey, I think you could make 55,000 the second half of June. It's like an insult to some of you because of the amount of money you make. You've got Farah, you got Corinthian, you got B. A lot of you to say, Michael, to make 55,000 in the second 2 weeks of June is an insult. But for the average person, and let's just talk to everyone else other than those outliers, 55,000 over the next 2 weeks isn't so bad, right? Especially when we have no investment. So with that, this is just simply annualizing that out, saying, okay, if we did that this month, then what would it be on an annual basis? So let's start. And I see a few questions popping up. But before I get to that, who has questions on these assumptions? Because if you understand the assumptions, then the outcome makes sense. All right, so Kenny brings up a great point. So there's upfront income, and that's how much you want to mark up the processing fee. You could mark it up zero, you could mark it up a lot, man. It's up to you how much you want to mark it up. Doesn't matter to me. You choose that. Let's assume 500 is what you want to mark it up for. That's an average. It's typical, keeps the client out of pocket at under 1,000. So that's in your pocket today or each day. Kenny's point is the back end, which is the passive income, isn't today. It isn't today, right? That's after we need about 7 days to transfer the Shelf Corp. Once we transfer the Shelf Corp, then we need to apply for funding. They need to get funding because they're paying the performance fee out of that. So you're right, Kenny. Upfront means upfront. This is going to be after the capital raise. But as we educated you on yesterday, we talked about the difference between accrual and we talked about the cash basis, cash versus accrual basis accounting. So here we're counting all the money earned, even though not all of it's necessarily received, because this is going to come in right away. This is going to have a lag. Yeah, that's a good point. But we talked about that yesterday. We talked about the difference between cash and accrual accounting. Okay, so let's see. Okay, Drake says that he has his first client and he had sent in the processing fee. Well, we haven't received it yet, Drake. So once we receive it, then we will process that client's file. So until, and so this is true for not just Drake, for everyone. So let's say you have a client, and we'll bring back up the notes screen. So this is a good process question. And this is Drake's first client as a reseller. So you want to get client under contract, right? So we use the express Shelf Corp agreement that you should have. If you don't have it, text us and we can get it over to you. Your job is to get the client under contract, and your job is to collect the processing fee. You determine how much that is. You determine the markup. Most of you are marking up 500. Now, Kenny, for instance, says 500 sucks. That's literally his words. Well, if you think you're worth more than that, then charge more than that, Kenny. You can make this 1,000 if you want. So you got to remember, you're controlling the pricing. You can never come to us and say that you're not making enough on the front end. The back end is fixed, but on the front end, you're controlling it, Kenny. And I don't know how much you're making now, but even at 500 a day, and assuming you do that consistently, which is the message that we're teaching, 500 a day times 20 work days in a month is 10,000. And I don't want to get too personal, Kenny, but are you putting 10,000 a month in your bank account right now? I know a lot of you are, but for a side gig, 10,000 a month's not exactly, meaningless. But of course, I know the bigger amount comes from the back end. Okay, so we had the process up there. So going back to Drake's question. So he has done this. Then what do we need to do? Let's make it clear. So you, meaning the reseller, get the client under contract and collect the processing fee. Then you upload client contract into portal. If you don't have that, let us know, Drake or anyone else, and we'll get your portal set up. Just text us and let us know you need it if that's the case. And then you forward our, if I spelled it right, a little delay there, our portion of the processing fee, which is the $4.99, right? So we said that anything above that, you keep. So then what happens, and so that's where essentially Drake is. He's done 1, 2, and 3, but we receive number 2 and number 3 and implement. So that's where we're at, Kenny, right? I'm sorry, Drake. That's where we're at. So yes, you've done 1, 2, and 3. You're perfect, but we're waiting for us to receive those 2 items. Then we implement. So yeah, don't kind of come off with the edge like, what are we doing? Well, until we receive 2 and 3, we don't do 4. And so, but I can define what implementation means. So let's go ahead and go through, what does implementation look like? What can you and the client expect? So let's create an extra space. So we will email the client the acknowledgement, we'll say. I'm going to spell that wrong, aren't I? We're going to send them the acknowledgement. And so the acknowledgement is going to be an email to them copying you saying, hey, thanks for enrolling with Drake. We'll have your deliverables in about 7 days. Let's go ahead and get your address set up. And that's one of the things I want to talk about, but we'll dig into that in a second. So it'll be an acknowledgement email, and Madison from our office, our funding coordinator, will call the client to welcome them. So, what will happen, Drake, are these two steps after you've done those three. And again, I know from your perspective, hey, you've done three, why hasn't four occurred yet? Well, we've not received the processing fee. Once we receive it, then we implement. Does that make sense, Drake? Okay, so Drake says he can't tell the client what to expect. That's exactly what we're going through right now. I'm clarifying with you, Drake, and everyone else exactly what we do so you'll know. What is it we're going to do? We're going to email the client, and I'll go ahead and add this, and copy you an acknowledgement email. That's what they should expect, is an email. They also should expect a call for Madison to welcome them. Now, we're going to go through other steps, but this is specifically what's going to happen. Does this happen after you've done 1, 2, or 3? No. It happens on 4, which means we've received the contract and our part of the processing fee. Make sense? So I think that's maybe where the hang up was. You didn't understand that. So do you have any other questions on that, Drake, or anyone else? Okay. Okay. Kenny asked, what does the grant cover? The grant covers the $10,000 cost of the Shelf Corp. It's crazy good. It's crazy good. They're not having to pay for the Shelf Corp the way they did prior to June 1st. And so that's the answer, Kenny. If that didn't make sense, maybe follow up. Carlos is asking about forwarding us the portion. So you're right. What a number of people are doing is actually kind of buying units in advance. So I'm not pitching this, I'm not recommending it, but let's say, let's take you, Carlos, you're a machine. So let's say that you know that you're going to probably sell 20 of these units in a month. So you could go ahead and send us our processing fee in advance for those 20. We set it aside in escrow. So now we have 20 that's essentially prepaid. So that would then accelerate the process because we could just pull from your escrow account every time you have a client that is under contract and put into the portal. So, yes, if you want to make it quicker for your clients, Carlos, it's on you. It's not on us. You can advance us as many units as you want. We'll set it aside in escrow, and then we can eliminate step 3. So if you would like to do that, let us know. All right. Jay is bringing a point, but of course, yeah. So, and I misspelled implementation, didn't I? All right, so let's go back down to the phases. We've covered this before, but let's go through it again. So there's 2 phases of implementation of the program, not of implementation, that'll confuse it, of the program. First, we need to buy, well, the client needs to buy or build a fundable business. Because if you don't have a fundable business, there's no funding, which is step 2, the funding. So these are 2 separate phases. These are 2 separate contracts, right? So this contract comes from you, and it's the Express Shelf Corp. And then once we have delivered the deliverables to the client, normally in 7 days, then we can go to funding. Client doesn't have to use our funding. Most will, 99% will. And then that comes from us, and we refer to that as access to capital funding agreement. So a client can do one, but not two. A client can do two, but not one. Most clients do both. The only reason they'd skip number one is if they already have a fundable business. That's rarely the case. So Jay is correct. There is a cost for us to raise capital for the client, and it's 10%. 10% performance fee, right? But if we didn't have that, Jay, guess what? Then this wouldn't exist. And we also pay an override to those of you, which is mentioned here on line 50. So you can build a team. We're not MLM, we're not network marketing, but you can build a team, and that team goes out and makes this money, and you make a 5-point override. So you're right. There is a performance fee off the capital raised. It's 10%. But if not, then this couldn't exist, and the overrides couldn't exist. So Jay, I'm not sure what your point is, but I just, as long as we do a really good job of understanding the two phases, this is standalone, separate contract, separate fee structure. Then once they have the fundable business in about 7 days, then we can go into the funding phase. Different contract, different payment terms based around the 10% performance fee. All right, so Jay has a good question on the details of this. So with the funding agreement, let's go into some details. So number one, it guarantees at least, so a minimum, a floor, not a maximum of 100,000. You've heard us say it, I suspect, a million times, right? We guarantee each client will generate raise at least 100,000. That's because we do it. That's true, and it's in writing, and that's why we talked about that here. So that's a fact. Jay's point is a little more complicated. Well, what if they have barriers? Well, we work with them to resolve the barriers. So everyone will get at least 100,000. So there is a separate agreement for each of these. This is your agreement. This is our agreement. You'll get them under contract for this and pay us our portion. We'll get them under contract for this and pay you your portion. Okay, so Christy asked, she's asking about the overrides, but I don't understand it enough, Christy, so you may have to ask the question differently. Okay, so we answered that one for Jay. So specifically, how does someone enter into the first contract? They contract with you, right? Which was here, and they pay the processing fee. That's how they get into number one. How do they get into number two? There's no advance cost for number two. They're going to sign the agreement, which we send them automatically once we have sent them the deliverables in about 7 days. Okay, so does that make sense, everyone? Any great questions? Drake says, yes, this makes sense so far, but I haven't even gotten a way of giving to the client's info. What you got to say, Drake, is this. You get them under contract, you collect the processing fee, and you let them know that soon the implementation team are going to be reaching out to them via email and by phone. And that's what we're going to do. So I think there's some discussion about the content of the email. So let's go ahead and go through that. Again, all questions are great. The more you understand, the better off. So let's go into this email. We'll put an asterisk here, and then we'll come down here and we'll say, okay, so the email, I don't have one to pull up easily. It's going to thank them for enrolling in the Express Shelf Corp from you. So you're going to be copied on it. It's going to reference you. So they connect the dots, right? We're your implementation team. We're your outsourced implementation team, right? So we're going to, you can verbally let them know that that's going to happen, and then we're going to do that in writing. Another thing that it includes is we're going to also set Why is there a delay there? Guess I got a delay, but it'll computer will catch up in a minute. It'll also allow us to set up their address. There it is. Set up their commercial address. And this is one of the topics I wanted to cover today. So there's different elements to have a fundable business. One element is having a unique commercial address. We provide the address for free. They'll pay for the mail forwarding, but we provide the address for free. But we need to assign the address and we need to know where to send their mail because we forward their mail weekly, normally on Wednesdays, today, for example. So in this initial email, it's going to welcome them. And it's also going to state, hey, we need to get your address set up. And with that address, that's going to allow us to use that, which we provide for free. We're going to provide, it's in the form of a lease. Kenny mentioned, yeah. So what we're building is a document set that meets lenders' credibility standards. Most lenders don't want to just know that a client has an address. They want documentation. They want evidence. So when we set up their commercial address, we set up a true lease. We don't charge them for the lease. They don't pay now. They don't pay ever, later, anytime for the lease. It's included. It's free for the life of their business. That's a huge benefit. The only thing they're going to cover is just the mail forwarding because we have to forward the mail to them. If they don't complete this, I'm sorry, let's highlight this. If they don't complete this portion, we've got a problem, Houston, because we need to have an address on their file and we provide it to them for free, but we need to have their address assigned. Because when we're going to the IRS to get the EIN in their name, when we're going to the Secretary of State to get the entity itself in their name, the address needs to be used and it needs to be used consistently. So yes, you could let them know, and again, you'll be copied on it, that when they get this initial email, and Madison will remind them as well, hey, you're going to get an acknowledgement email. They're going to need about 7 days to put together your Shelf Corp documents. But by the way, be sure to go ahead and complete the lease. Complete the lease. Why do we need the lease again? If we don't have the lease, we don't have an assigned address for them, and everything needs an address. Secondly, we need their forwarding address of where to send their mail. And they may be saying, well, mail, they're going to get mail? Well, of course. When you go put an entity, either form one or change one into a person's name, the IRS sends documentation that the client's going to need. When you either form a business or change a business into a client's name, the Secretary of State and the Comptroller's office is going to send mail. It's not junk mail, Kenny. It's not junk mail. It's fucking crucial mail to run that business. And if they don't have that mail, they're not going to be able to remain compliant. So we talked yesterday about the importance of setting a business up properly. Part of having a properly set up business is having a commercial address, and it can't be just, oh, jokingly, sure, I'll list that, but it's not my address. It's what they would use. So if their mail's coming in, then we need to forward to them on a weekly basis. So hopefully that makes sense. I feel like the question that a couple of you are asking that's not very clear, but what I infer is, what if they have their own address? If they have their own address, then they shouldn't be going into the Express Shelf Corp, right? Because what's the value proposition of the Express Shelf Corp? It's a business in a box, right? It includes the entity in compliance at the federal, the state level, includes the business plan, the financial forecast, the commercial address. It's everything built together. So if they don't want to use that business in the box, now they can change it later, granted, but if initially they don't want that business in the box, then you're not getting them into the right solution. Then we need to go build. So let's go back up. Remember, they can either buy a fundable business from you, which is called a Shelf Corp, or we can build one. If they don't want the Shelf Corp that comes in a box that's all set up for funding to make this really fast so we can go from phase 1 to phase 2 very quickly, if they don't want that, then don't don't sell them something that they don't want. Then they need to come into the build, which takes longer and it's more expensive. But if that's what they want, that's fine. So great discussion here. That's important for you to understand. All right, so back to Christy. She restated her question. So if you're building a team, it's real simple. So if you're building a team, they're going to make this money that's shown right here. So what I'm showing here is what we'll say the reseller or grant coordinator is making that's actually doing the deal. And then the equal amount, which is very simple to calculate. So this same amount is paid to both the reseller slash grant coordinator that generates the client, and then the same amount, 5%, is paid as an override. So let's go back to Christy's question and see if I got that. Yeah, I think that's the answer. So that's the concept. So there's not an override on the front end, but there's the bigger amount, there's a match. And so the reseller grant coordinator that brings the clients in gets the 5%, which is at least 5,000, and then you're getting at least 5,000 for every deal they bring in. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's recap, and then we'll close out for today. So when we're building out a fundable business, we're not doing it to our benefit or your benefit. We're doing it for the client's benefit. We're delivering to them what's needed. And so what is needed are certain elements, and the commercial address is one of those. Lenders typically want to see a lease. So we provide, when you look at it, you say, oh my gosh, it's like 14, 16 pages long. What am I getting into? It's zero cost. It's a lease like the lender wants to see, but they're not paying anything. The term of the lease is set up to match the SBA 7A repayment term because that's what they require. So it's set up legally and ethically to match what lenders want. It's great. I mean, that you and I are delivering to them what we promised, which is a fundable business. Because why? If you don't have a fundable business, you're not going to get business funding. All right, Kenny just clarified he's charging the normal $9.99, so he's marking it up just like this. So this is what Kenny would expect to make, as well as any of you that want to. But I'm sorry, yeah, it's Kenny. Kenny, this is literally what Kenny should make this month, and you could make the same if you want. All right. Jeff brings up a good point. So before June 1st, the grant worked differently. Remember? And I hate to revisit this too much, but before June 1st, the grant reimbursed the client after they've paid for the Shelf Corp and completed the capital raise, completed steps 1 and 2. So that was a different process. It was more cumbersome. So since the grant reimbursed afterwards, it meant the client needed to pay up front. Now, if they didn't want to pay out of pocket, we could get financing. If they didn't stay current with the financing, then they held up the implementation. So, Jeff, you're exactly right. That was choppier. Now, I believe it's very, very smooth. So for everyone that we're enrolling going forward, it's a smooth process, should be a smooth process. But thanks for Drake and others asking really good questions or bringing up points. So I think today we all have a better understanding of the process, the implementation, the very important role of the commercial address. If they don't sign this lease, which how much does a lease cost them? Zero. They're just paying the mail forwarding. But if they don't sign this lease, we're stuck, because we can't go put what's called a dead address on file. If we go to the IRS and give the IRS an address that they're not going to get their mail at, it's called quote unquote a dead address. IRS/EIN, they don't like that. If we go to the Secretary of State and we put an address on record that's not really their address, they're not going to get their mail, they don't like that. So it's called a dead address. So yes, you definitely want to remind them that they're going to get an email from us, from support at guaranteedfunding.org. You'll be copied on it. They're going to get a phone call from Madison to make sure that they find this. It's going to welcome them, and it's going to ask them to complete the lease. No cost for the lease. All they pay is mail forwarding. If they don't complete the lease, we've got a problem because we can't fulfill the Shelf Corp until we have a good address. Very important. Very important. Very important. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow if you need specific help. Sorry, they're out here working on the building in the rain. So you hear some tractors in the background. But best thing to do is to text us if you need individualized help. 903-347-8042. Hoping to be in the new office building and training facility in July and have you all in to meet in person. Thanks, everyone. See you back tomorrow. And bye-bye.